Blog Talk Radio.
I saw a cloud today. I watched it change its shape into a dinosaur, a whale, a mermaid, and a plane. The mermaid was pregnant, and then it turned into a Doberman, and the Doberman just turned back into the sky. Then I saw a real plane flying awfully low, man, dropping toxic chemicals all over my town. It says to help us, but they're just trying to hold us down and try and take away our clouds and replace them with their own crop dust in downtown. They say it's the ozone, but they don't care about your home. They're just trying out new ways of population control. We're young and we're bold. We can throw away their laws and replace them with our own. And the story will be told about the group of young adults who overthrew the throne, shone a light on just how bright this world could surely shine. Utopia works conceptually, but even in reality, to overthrow the state, we all gotta be in the right state of mind. I saw a bird today, I watched it fly away, and in my heart I knew I had to do the same. The town's really gotten to me, the streets smell rotten to me, and I still can't stand those goddamn fucking planes. But they're only flying now, someday they'll be bombing town. They already started a secret chemical war. They've taken all we had and still want more. The sky is saturated with rain, I swear I'm not insane. It's going to pour, it's going to pour. So don't you use no phone, because the government can bug anybody's home. So don't walk the streets alone, because they might steal you in the night without your family being told. But we're young and we're bold, and we can throw away their laws and replace them with our own. And the story will be told about the group of young adults who overthrew the throne, shone a light on just how bright this world could surely shine. Utopia works conceptually, but even in reality, to overthrow the state, we all gotta be in the right state of mind. We all gotta be in the right state of mind. There's no telling just how far we can climb if we're just in the right state of mind.
Thank you, everyone, for tuning in once again to Universal Truth Evolution on blogtalkradio.com. I'm your host, Jerry Avalos, once again bringing you all the information major media tends to shy away from. And I'm really excited for this show. We have it's really a special show because this is the first time we've had Universal Truth Evolution guests in the studio with us and doing a live interview face-to-face, which is awesome. We usually don't get this chance, and to get an actual personable connection. And our guests today are very esteemed, Doctors J.J. Hurtak and Desiree Hurtak, founders of the Academy of Future Science, and an international non-governmental organization that works to bring cooperation between science and consciousness. The Academy works in areas of consciousness development, social projects, including serving to protect indigenous tribes and the activation of culture of peace. Doctors, it's a pleasure to have you here with me today. So
it's great to be here, Jerry, with your world audience.
Of course, we're going to be talking about some other things that I know is of interest to your audience, such as maybe extraterrestrial life, which is one of our passions as well.
I think the overall scope of what we want to address is really the emergence of a new image of humankind and a consciousness of elevation, a consciousness of change that is with us throughout the world. We see this in the young We see this in the indigenous people we talk to. We see this in a whole new generation of younger scientists looking at, as it were, a whole new scientific reality directed by consciousness. And this is why we call our organization the Academy for Future Science, because we believe there always will be science and there always will be a future.
Yeah. And I know many people are talking about 2012, but I think the consensus now, and of course there's a few stray people around, but the consensus now is that it's really just going to be a new movement into a greater unity of thought. It's a new step forward for all of us, and we all have to do something. I liken it, 2012, to the Y2K, the Millennial Development Bug. And, if people had done nothing, then you would have had airplanes falling out of the sky. And, of course, at the end of it, it says, oh, nothing happened. But that's because everybody worked together to do something, to make it better. And I think that's what we have to do now. I mean, we see climate change, and I won't say global warming, it's climate change. Yeah. It's extremes going on. And, things going on like the oil spill in the Gulf of Mexico, which might have affected what's called the thermohaline current that goes all the way up to England. I know some of you maybe are listening in England. I mean, if those things slow down, it gets colder and colder. It gets colder in New York. And, I'm not saying that that's why it was cold this year, but it certainly was different. Yeah. Maybe take some people back 40 or 50 years to when they were getting raised, or when they were growing up in New York. I know some people said they used to have 2 feet of snow. And for a long time in New York City, we lived there for 10 years, and there was almost no snow in the winter at all. So things are changing, and, some of it we're doing, and some of it I think is just the whole cosmic cycle we're in.
Mother Nature is speaking to us now. We must listen to her cry. We must see really in the oceanic changes, the destruction of marine life on a worldwide scale, the species disappearing before our eyes, that there's a whole new chapter of biology as well as stewardship before us. We can either take this as an advantage to make great breakthroughs in food engineering, in alternative energies, breakthroughs in medicine, astronomy, physics, or we can simply sit back and turn off the light bulb over our head. Yeah. Yep. So this is a great quantum change that we see that's coming, and this is very important. So I think what we start out with is the evidences that we're not alone in the universe. This is very important. As we know, there are many governments throughout the world now releasing their documents. This is called government disclosure from New Zealand that has recently released its important documents to Nick Pope in England. Yeah. All of these documents that are being released, literally thousands and thousands of pages, are telling us that there are other cosmic cultures in the universe that we must be aware of.
But what's really cool about these cosmic cultures, if some people watch in September of 2010, there was a meeting at the National Press Club sponsored by Robert Hastings, and he brought together some old military, ex-military people talking about how some of these extraterrestrial spacecraft were seen over certain Air Force bases here in the United States. And when they flew over some of these bases, there were nuclear, what we call ICBMs, 60 feet down in the ground, and their technology went neutral. They turned them off. Now, this whole National Press Club thing got almost no publicity. It was a fantastic gathering of people, but it got almost no publicity. And one of the speakers, which is Mr. Salas, said that, no one could touch those missiles because they were in the ground. There was nothing on the above ground that could turn them off. But still, when these vehicles were seen over there, they were turned off. So I think that's a great sign.
Yeah, me too.
Because it's a sign for peace. It's a sign that they're really concerned about who we are and what we're doing. Now, some of that was back in the 60s, but
I'm not sure if you guys ran to this, but recently there was another National Press Club meeting where they talked of another incident like this in the late 90s. So it's actually happened multiple times now, corroborated once again by these nuclear.
In fact, we were just in Buenos Aires, and there's a big nuclear. It's just a power plant outside of Buenos Aires, and there were vehicles seen around that. That was one of the most recent sightings. I think that took place sometime it was November of 2010. So that's what's really good. If I can go on for just a minute here. For those who have been concerned about the animals on this planet, and the birds and the fish, David Serrata did a research that maybe the problems that had happened, I believe it was January of 2011, when some of these fish were having problems and the birds fell out of the sky, might have been some sort of cosmic event that, and we believe that. We don't think everything is coming from this planet. Some of it is really coming from, say, solar flares. Dr. Hurtak wrote a book called The Book of Knowledge, Keys of Enoch, back in the 70s, and he said that solar flares are going to be major. I mean, they're going to be a real concern for all of us. But what we're finding is that there's a good possibility that some of these extraterrestrial spacecraft are in some ways trying even to protect this planet from major solar flares that might come this way. So that's a real positive again.
I had the opportunity in 1995 really to be part of the first, quote-unquote, disclosure program in Washington, D.C. In May of 1995, former government people, leading researchers such as myself and Dr. John Mack from Harvard University, leading media people got together and brought forth documentation under the title When Cosmic Cultures Meet. This title was chosen because it was not a situation of debating whether or not these cosmic cultures exist, but when they will knock on our door, when they will be, shall we say, defining the territory and the understanding of where we can share and engage in meaningful language, both on a sociological level as well as on a spiritual, philosophical level. And that's really the thrust that Desiree and I represent. We're interested really in the level of conversation, the handshake that must take place, not simply the fingers touching each other as we see in the Sistine Chapel of Michelangelo, a man reaching up and the divine reaching down, but we're interested in the follow-up and the realization that there are scientific civilizations in outer space, if we are to believe these documents, and the testimony of astronauts and cosmonauts, and we must gear up, we must raise our consciousness so that we can meaningfully work with the non-benign cultures of space and also receive the endowments of what our ancestors have told us through their great traditions of folklore.
Actually, you meant the benign cultures of space, because what's really interesting is we actually think that life in space is, even more abundant, of course, than life on this planet, and you have all types, just like you have here. You have to be careful of few people, because they have their own agendas, not because they're evil necessarily, but they got their own agendas, and that maybe doesn't help you. And then there's the guys that are really like the Mother Teresa's out there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that was a great point that you're talking about in terms of a dialogue, the handshake, because there's I think that a lot of us have moved past to are they there, or and even some experiential stuff to that same extent, because there's one thing I make the point of is that people say, well, why aren't they landing on the White House lawn? Well, it's like they don't have to, because they're already making contact with people via dreams, via visions, sightings, all these other things, and it's kind of and you're seeing multiple people reporting the same things without each knowing each other, knowing them, and so that's a good way to you can compile that as data, and so we're seeing it happen, and so that finger, that touching has already happened here, and it's good that more of us recognize that so we can start having these dialogues. So what would you say is what we can do to kind of further that into the dialogue? Well,
we actually think that there is a greater plan in terms of awakening us. So we were talking, I know, before the show started, you go back to the 40s and 50s and 60s, and when the RAND Corporation came out and said, people aren't ready for contact, so even if they were there, we shouldn't know about it. But
also, the Brookings Institute also had its own program. But when I use the word benign and you use the word non-benign, we're basically playing with popular figures of speech, because the intelligence that shows itself for all intents and purposes could be benign on one level and non-benign on another. So you have to work with what I would call a transformational linguistics.
But so Dr. Hurtak, when he had an experience, which we call the Keys of Enoch, where literally an entity called Enoch came and brought him into higher levels of experience, showed him that over a period of time, everything from archaeology, which we've seen, and this is from 73 on, to astronomy, to ideas of genetics, all these levels from science to consciousness, and like you said, dreams. I mean, we even talk about pictures and sounds and visualizations that people will get in their dream state, is preparing us. So it's not just us in a sense. If you think we've really jumped fast, in the last 100 years. People talk about, horse and buggy and now to where we are, flying with Virgin Galactic into space. I mean, technically, we feel some of this has been thought energy that's come down to the scientists. And we've met some of these scientists working in Northern California in Silicon Valley who actually in their dreams have gotten like visions of how to make things.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then they put them together, and then it's like miracles. Even Einstein used to meditate.
Yeah.
So all these things are coming to help us get to the point where contact can be made.
So it's the use of that part of the psyche that can think multidimensionally. It's the use of the fantastic power of the heart to reach out through unconditional love to all peoples of planet Earth. It's the ability to forge a whole new sociology and psychology that can positively look at the opportunities we are facing as a civilization taking its baby steps into the extraterrestrial frontier. And I'm using this term in terms of traditional aerospace and cosmology, and also just the willingness to grasp the deeper meaning of the ancient myths in philosophical teachings of the great religions that lay a frontier suggesting that Mother Earth is basically a schoolhouse and that some way we pass through this type of experience, i.e. three-dimensional, into a different level of consciousness exploration. So we are facing what the Keys of Enoch call the coming of the higher evolution. That is multiple levels of intelligence using multiple languages. We must forge a cosmic syntax or grammar at this time because various cultures and various religious groups will experience on different levels of interpretation.
Yeah.
Right, and so like Lima, Peru, in downtown Lima, Peru, there were like 30 vehicles seen up above in the sky, and they lasted so long that you had news crews out there. You can find this on YouTube, shooting the images. So people they know there already. I mean, many people said, I don't believe in extraterrestrials, but I don't know what those things are,
Yeah.
So, I mean, people are getting prepared on many levels. Look at the Catholic Church.
Yeah.
I mean, that was a major release as far as we're concerned, that Antonio Funes, who used to be from Argentina and now is with the Vatican Observatory, made official statements that, probably there's life in the universe and we're all God's creation and we all should be able to accept that.
Yep.
And then he brought together the following year. That was in, I believe, 2008 or 9. I think it was 9. Then 8, I think it was. Yes. 8. And then on 9, he brought together a whole team of scientists and religious scholars to discuss this. And we feel this is part of a slow release program. And I think in some cases, although the government is working with probably some of these larger institutions to start releasing the information, there's also a coordination that has to take place with the other side, with the extraterrestrials who are also coordinating this. So it's kind of like a global coordination.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think that's one thing that it's good that you mentioned that because I think that a lot of people in the disclosure movement, shall we say, are caught up in a little bit too much of the anger portion, and not recognizing that this has been an ongoing negotiation because of all the different interests involved and factors involved. And I understand how people feel insulted by the Brookings reports and stuff like that, but it's kind of like, well, they don't apply anymore, so let's move on.
Exactly. So, well, we're really excited, of course, that the UK has released so much documentation.
Absolutely.
The French, the New Zealand people, just released that. That's fantastic, New Zealand government. But, all this is still just paperwork in terms of what I think the U.S. government can really come out with.
Oh, yeah. And, Dr. J.J. Hurtak here is showing me one of his documentations about when he was releasing when he was the first, I believe, he said, person to release documentation that the United States government had extraterrestrial biological entities, shall we say, in their possession. So if you want to comment about that.
Well, this was in 1979, and I was one of the speakers at an international congress in Mexico City, and this is quoting from the El Universal for July 16th, 1979, where I speak about the extraterrestrial subjects. I define the characteristics of the specimens. This was later enhanced by an American researcher known as Leonard Stringfield. And most of this information, because it was presented in Latin America, didn't really reach the interest of the press here in the United States, but it was based upon work that I had done privately with investigators and researchers who claimed to have seen special specimens that were sequestered in military morgues.
Interesting.
And we have seen now the whole impact through disclosure that there are other areas, in fact, from Listoe, the leading Brazilian magazine for 1996, we have a front-page story of small ET specimens that were captured by the Brazilian military and brought to a military location, then to a hospital in the city of Campinas in southern Brazil. At the time, I was a consultant to a company called Laser Technology, and an opportunity to talk to people at the hospital facility near Unicamp in Campinas who, through sign language, told me that they had examined the specimen that had been brought down. So we have information that was quietly presented in several private sessions at the United Nations and in special sessions before various government teams going on for some 30 to 40 years now. We are really reaching a point where people no longer really debate the fundamentals. Are we alone? What's the next step? The question is, what type of sociology, what type of psychology, what type of ecumenical theology do we need now really to see this as a common ground for the spiritual and scientific to merge?
Yes, absolutely.
We're the new image of humankind. We're seeking to realize that we're just one level in a step ladder of evolution.
Well, probably the first real bodies that the U.S. government did receive was around the Roswell incident. And, so what's interesting is it wasn't just the vehicles that were there, maybe one, if not two, some people say, vehicles crashed at that time, but also that these bodies were found. And, and that's a long time ago, 1947, I believe, that, we've had that kind of information. And it seems that perhaps even in the 50s, then we started communicating with some of these different entities. Now, we don't think that these are that sophisticated, but certainly their technology is very exciting. If we can back engineer something like what Bob Lazar has said, back engineer this technology and be able to hopefully use the energy systems not only for military, but eventually for people. Once we can change our energy technology, if we can gain that knowledge from extraterrestrial civilizations, I mean, it'll be a whole new planet.
Oh, yeah.
For the benefit of the audience throughout the world, Bob Lazar, interviewed by George Knapp, made his debut some years ago regarding Area 51 S4 facilities, and of course, as a quote-unquote whistleblower, has become a subject of vast notoriety throughout the world.
Yeah, absolutely.
But we have known personally several of the whistleblowers, including Bill Uhouse and others in the field who have stepped forth in recent times, suggesting a plethora of information really on the home front that younger scientists, researchers, psychiatrists, philosophers, and what I will call exotheologists have to address. If there are these vast cultures, and we know that there are more than 57 different races, according to recent counts, what brings us together? What is the whole structure of trade-offs? How will this take place? And my work, I have been working with those in a new area called space law. I'm showing Jerry here one of the articles released by the Brazilian press, stating in effect that we are stewards of Mother Earth, and if we are going to forge a frontier into space, we have to show that we are peacemakers on the high frontier. We have to curb the militarization of outer space. We have to prevent weapon systems that could destroy satellites, even though this was the case with the Chinese and recently with the Americans bringing down defunct satellites. We have to clean up the lower, shall we say, frontier of space.
Well, many people, as you said, say, why don't they just land on the White House lawn? But we believe that the day the Earth stood still, that movie back in the 50s, was a real message, actually, that the governments had gotten. We have to put away our weapons of war, otherwise we can't join that cosmic brotherhood. And what was really interesting, Dr. Hurtak, in 1973, with the ITN message,
1977, November 26th.
Right. He was interviewed because he was at this conference down in Mexico City, and he said, the extraterrestrials are saying, put away your weapons of war, the time to live together and peace is short.
That was on page 1 of Novedades.
Which is the main paper down there. And then that night, which is after he had said that and after they had recorded that and put it in the newspaper, there was a break in the transmission of one of the 3 major stations in England called ITN.
That was at 5:05 p.m. London time.
And they actually, it was this voice that came across and said, we're, the Galactic Command, and, we're here to help your planet. You're going through this really transition period and great chance to evolve. I'm paraphrasing everything here, but basically the bottom line that they did say, quote unquote, is you need to put away your weapons of war. The time to live together in peace is short. And so the people in Novedades picked up on that because it was
so this was carried page 2, the following day, part 2 of my interview, along with the communique that was brought through the ITN people in Greater London. And, of course, I had a colleague, member of British Parliament. He went to check with the archives to see whether this transition did take place, this transmission, I should say, was then seen as something that could not have been engineered by the specialists there in the labs.
So the real message is really going back to peace. And what was really interesting, Colin Andrews is a friend of ours, and he's done a lot of the crop circle research around Stonehenge. And he also picked up on this ITN message. In fact, he heard it live because he was living in England at the time. In fact, he had just gotten his first, he was telling us, tape recorder, and he had put it on to listen to the news, and this break thing came through, and then he heard this message. And now he tracked the transmission tower that had been interrupted. There was a particular one transmission tower. This we could never have done, but he's an electrical engineer, and he knew all this stuff. And it was right there by Stonehenge in that area where some of the first crop circles, I think it's called Worcestershire, where the first crop circles had ever materialized. That was the transmission tower. There was a thing that broken through and then broke the tire. And it's occurred all throughout South London or South England because of that.
At that same period, the president of Israel was visiting Mexico. The same period of time had gone to Egypt. So they're in the critical time. The president of Acoustic was this but there had been a vehicle on
overhead, by the way. Okay.
So
I think we got.
Hello, are we back?
Too.
Hello, everyone. Sorry about that. We experienced some technical difficulties, as I'm sure a lot of our regular listeners here are very accustomed to these coincidental cutoffs. So
we often knock out the lights, unfortunately. So let's hope we don't do that anymore today.
That means we're on to something good. So our audience knows that means. I'm
thinking of the executives in the ITN office in London saying, where did that voice come from? How did that connection get disconnected? And someone say, hey, John did that.
Yeah. But what's cool is that we were talking, of course, about the ITN broadcast at that one transmission tower right by the main crop circle areas, especially right where the first crop circles were formed. There was about 3 back in, I think some of them were, was he saying in the 70s? I think the late 70s were some of the first crop circles. And
the crop circles that he's dealing with basically from the time period 82 to the present. But there were historic markings that you could take as crop circles. But, Colin Andrews defined the term crop circles.
But
the Keys of Enoch, as early as 1973, in Key 215, speak of round circles or round numbers that would be seen around Stonehenge. And this was the point of interest that we had with Colin.
Right. And one other thing, which I know we'll get into our second hour and talk more about, but he was saying that oftentimes, and this has happened, I know, to some of our friends, you can be standing on a hill, or what he was doing was sleeping very close to a field, and he said, if this is real, if this stuff is really real, I want to see a Celtic cross in the nearest field to me. Can we possibly get that? Next day he got it.
No.
So also our friends Gary King, they were out there with like night viewing goggles, and they were looking, and by 4 o'clock, or actually around 3 o'clock, there was just a flash of light, and you can see this, I think it's on the internet, but otherwise we have a copy of the video from Gary himself. Flash of light, And then all of a sudden this huge circle was there.
Wow.
So it didn't take a long time to form.
Yeah.
It was just there.
Yeah.
So it's like thought, it's like manifestation. And some of it, can be from a person who's out there in the field, but not that one from Gary King and probably not that one from Colin Andrews. So there's a lot that are just manifesting.
But if I was to take the position of a traditional skeptic, I would say military platform technology could do this, or even satellite technology.
Well, there's
they
a
could
lot
beam
of
down
military.
a microwave and do the signal. So, again, there's a school of thought. We must understand that some of these crop circles are made by very advanced people involved with imaging and using remote sensing technology. This is a situation that even Colin Andrews addresses. So we recognize that in the galactic soup, there are those civilizations that may endanger humanity, may give us, as it were, a sense of euphoria on one hand, but also a type of dictatorial spirit on the other. We must therefore use a good selective factor in working with those who can consistently give us things in the open with transparency, so that a worldwide scientific group, a worldwide global commons can receive knowledge that can be then looked at and studied openly, that can affect all of humanity, not just a private elite. Again, this is a reason why I believe the governments did have a reason for wanting to be very circumspect and very careful, because you could say, there is a reason looking at what happened with the Spanish conquistadors in South America, where certain civilizations collapse in the face of superior civilizations. I mean, these are realities that the great think tanks have addressed, and we have to be not naive. We have to acknowledge the fact that governments of the world generally see superior civilizations as a type of threat until there is a language of negotiation, a space law, if you will, in this case, a language that can bring together meaningful answers to questions as to who we are, why we're here, where we have come from, and where we go to the next quantum change that's coming very soon. Yeah. So this calls to mind really the importance of what is going on behind the scenes at very, very high levels.
Yeah, and I think it was interesting as we were talking about just before we got cut off that one time about Mexico being the area of contact, and I think like how we're talking about the you're showing me the articles released in from over there, and I think that people don't realize when you see figures like Jaime Maussan talking about
good friend of ours, actually.
Yeah, exactly, and people don't realize he's like one of the main news anchors. He's like so he's talking about this.
He has a national show actually that he was given, and it goes all over. And Dr. Hurtak's been on several times, and he's
he's my best student.
Yeah, he's a spiritual brother in that sense. Cool. And back in the I would say 80s when he was actually on 60 Minutes or the Echo satellite. We started bringing some of this information to him about extraterrestrials, and he was going, well, let me check it out, And but then, he started moving into it and realizing, this is the transformation for the planet, and he's been fantastic. I mean, he also has looked at the crop circles as well and all the different things taking place around the world.
And is also aware, of course, of climate change issues.
Yeah.
He was the first to look really at the world ozone dilemma situations that were being studied by colleagues of mine from Punta Arenas in southern Chile, using very sophisticated aircraft. Anyway, we have to really look at the vectors that are coming together here.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think one of the most recent programs of Jaime, and maybe correct me if it wasn't Jaime's program, but I think it was, where he showed that the sun, in the midst of solar flares, had some unusual objects around it. And we believe that really, as I mentioned earlier, that some extraterrestrial spacecraft could really try to neutralize some of these flares from hurting us, at least till we get more, in tune with ourselves and have that extra phase of evolution that we need to still go through.
And there's also the, I'm not sure if you're familiar with Nassim Haramein's work.
A little bit, yeah.
And he talked about the sun being like a portal for certain civilizations to use to kind of come in and out of different systems.
Assuming the Japanese have known this in their great traditions, they believe that their ancestry that manifested itself through Kimu and Jimmu in the South Pacific, connected with the legendary motherland of the temple tradition of Mu, came directly from the people coming from the direction of the sun. In fact, they're the most advanced country, in my opinion, that has a deeper understanding of how science and futurism come together and have met privately, that is to say, on a government level, to discuss the issues of how the Japanese nation will react if indeed there should be this type of crossover or overlap with higher intelligence in the near future.
Of course, I like to also think that we really came from a light source, a higher light source, and I think this is something that we talk about. And many people think that people on this planet were some sort of hybrid species from, say, the root races of the Earth to extraterrestrials, but we don't think that way because we feel when you go out in space, you're going to find us as well. And we weren't hybridized. We actually have some really significant positive code structures in our DNA. And that code structure from our DNA really came from what some people are talking about, especially Peter Greif in Russia, a wave frequency of light. So we were really light beings. If you go back to Genesis, it actually tells you this, that, we didn't put on garments of skin until a later point, like Genesis 3.
There was an earlier stage of evolution.
Exactly.
A transhuman stage.
And so we're certainly here in the flesh, but the energy codes that went into us came from these higher dimensional light realms. And so the sun also can be seen as that light vibration. I'm
showing Jerry here a document taken some 10 years ago in Tulum, Mexico, where in the midst of a gathering, I, as a speaker, began to intone certain sacred names of the divine, and at that point, a light burst took place around my body. You can see it here clearly. I'll let Jerry describe it to the audience here, a type of paraphysical explosion of light.
Yeah, it's an interesting sort of...
It was taken late in the afternoon. The sun had gone down, and a man was taking a picture of his wife and just happened to catch...
At Tulum,
At Tulum, this event, and you can see my translator in the background being taken literally by surprise.
Or something. Yeah, and it's interesting because, just knowing what I know about taking pictures, being an artist, it's the flare of the light is not in congruency with where the sun would have to be for it to be a lens flare from the sun. So it's interesting. It's like this kind of curved whitish gold kind of light, and you could see the translator go like, what the fuck? And it's pretty good. It's really cool.
We might be able to put that on the site later on. Huh?
Yeah, we'll try to get a picture of it. We'll try to get a picture of this for everyone to see on our website and in the archives, and hopefully on YouTube as well.
So this exemplifies the earlier experience that Desiree spoke of in the 1970s when I had the momentary privilege, really, of seeing a being of light that had a human face, but it was a very human-like face, had beautiful light streaming around the face, and then this light was placed momentarily around me.
So that's why when we talk about extraterrestrials, and then we say, well, we might have come from a higher light source, we feel that beyond the extraterrestrial...
Are the ultra-terrestrials, or what the ancients would call the super-angelic, as the guiding minds of the universe. And this is an opportunity we're facing now. Do we go into dialogue simply with some bizarre extraterrestrial civilization that gives us technology like candy, that might be like the benign Spanish conquistadors in the first phase of contact, only to put us into a type of mental captivity? Or do we go with those who really are able to work with us over a longer period of time and put, as it were, all of the trade-offs on the table, because this is really in the engagement of world civilization.
So we still think some level of discernment is necessary for all of us. And I like the movie V because you have that other side. Even though they're saying one thing, they're finding out there's another. And some of these entities seem to be like that. And they're actually, a friend of ours who's passed away now, his name was Posty, he wrote a book, he says, they need us, we don't need them. And, of course, we all want to work together. But his concept was the fact that they like our genetic code. They like what we can give them, and it helps boost who they are, or helps, enhance who they are. So that's why they're coming for some of these abduction experiences. And technically, we're working on a much different level. And I believe our consciousness can be equal, if not stronger, than their consciousness. Maybe not the technology, but the consciousness. That's a different realm.
Yeah, and I think all of it really kind of is kind of an equilibrium at one point of perspective anyways. I mean, it's like you hear the different stories concerning certain races not being able to perceive certain feelings or emotions, and here we are having them and things like that. And so yeah, and then you kind of, you it brings into question what truly is superior, of having this keen logical, filing system, or being able to experience like a rich multi-perceptional feeling almost, in a sense. It's something that's very rich like that. So yeah, and I think and I agree with that in terms of, they need us in that sense, because it's like, yeah, we actually need each other to have some kind of understanding of who we are, what we're doing, and what we really want to do, actually, for that matter, So,
well, there's a story, and this is known by many anthropologists, that when the Spanish ships first appeared on the horizon to the islands of the New Americas, many of the native peoples, the indigenous peoples,
couldn't see them.
Could not see the ships on the horizon. I mean, they were there, but in terms of their perceptual reality, they weren't there. There was something that was so vastly different.
The rational mind couldn't conceive of it.
Yeah.
And this is the situation, in a sense, we face, where we need a double think or triple think opportunity to debate these issues through the Global Commons, through the National Press Club in Washington, D.C., and other capitals of the world, so the young people at the universities, on the internet, such as we're doing now. I mean, this is the whole world schoolhouse beginning to share, as it were, the same blue books, pardon the expression, from the Air Force, blue book, which in my opinion was a $6 million cover-up.
Yeah, really.
And to look at the realities. I'm sharing also with you, Jerry, as they are MC here, a document from Brazil showing a series of photographs that I brought back for colleagues at NASA to examine back in the 80s.
Now, what's unique about Brazil is that not only is it well known that there are extraterrestrial vehicles that have been seen around Brazil, but very professional and high-ranking people like General Ochoa and some other captains and generals have actually witnessed this. So the Brazilian government is actually quite aware of extraterrestrial entities, and they've done a lot of the research and willing to come up.
And in May of 1986, referring now to a series of pictures that I just showed Jerry, I was in Brazil. A series or squadron of spacecraft, circular in form, passed over the state of Sao Paulo and in the vicinity of Salto dos Campos in southern Brazil. And to the shock of the press, people who were there was a consternation, because people suddenly realized not only was there a squadron of vehicles, very massive in size, but they rendezvoused over a nuclear facility that was being built at that time, unbeknownst to the Brazilian people. And so when the story broke, basically the Brazilian authorities had to admit that they were building this facility, and this led really to the stopping of the program. It was just a realization that whoever was coming was blowing the whistle, so we say, from the other side, saying, look, you guys are taking the wrong step towards a slow or a sudden move towards technological self-destruction if you have this in the context of military application.
So I think it's really exciting, even though we're all awaiting the U.S. government to disclose everything. That's only one phase. What we really need, the phase we really need, and I think that's the true disclosure, is when extraterrestrials start, working a little bit closer with us. And I will start, and actually the Keys of Enoch say that. It will start for most people in their dream state. It will awaken their consciousness, because they have to slowly accept. I know we've seen certain very unusual things, and even though you know that they're there, when you actually see them, it's like still shocking to your reality. It's just, as much as logical as you can be to say, I know extraterrestrials exist, when you actually see it,
but in the context now of the abductions and other things that are going on, and this is not a, shall we say, a chapter that has to be diminished or overlooked, we didn't know that there are non-positive extraterrestrial cultures. And there are experiences that even the folklore of the shamans in Brazil and the Zulus in South Africa state that their women and children were taken without proper permission. So in our work, in our research with sociologists, with environmentalists, with social scientists, in various parts of the world, we've seen a wide variety of stories suggesting, on one hand, there are some cultures out in space that reflect the situation that we have here on Mother Earth. They're simply dealing on, as it were, power systems, and we have to be very careful. And this is why our work is to work with a approach making use of the visual arts, music, and linguistics in the context of what I call a type of language of transformation, where we begin to see ourselves within the full impact that we are not only human beings, but we are our potential divine beings waking up to a much greater possibility of life in the universe. And if there are divine beings, they mean those from the ultra-terrestrial dimensions, it means that we must avoid the great temptation of making UFOs or extraterrestrials the new conquistadors or the Spanish ships that will simply give us a whole bunch of things on one hand, but derive from us things that they will use to put us into a type of mental purgatory on another.
Yeah.
So, again, we have to see this, but we must move beyond it as a recognition that there, fortunately, are more positive options we have in the high frontier than negative.
So there's a good possibility that many people who are awakening in their inner consciousness are not awakening necessarily to ET levels of intelligence, but to UT or ultra-terrestrial levels of intelligence. And these are the ones that are behind the real feeding of information to this planet to awaken us and prepare us for changes. Because we do feel that there are solar changes taking place. There's astrophysical changes that are going to affect this planet. And we also need to start waking up to how we can better use our technology and not destroy planet Earth.
Notice the importance of the Book of Knowledge, Keys of Enoch. It's the cosmic textbook showing us how all of the new information from the genetics of the DNA waveform to the finding of ancient civilizations of contact on Mother Earth, to the expansion of the social sciences into space law and a new psychology, all are preparing us to see how a holistic approach is absolutely necessary. Why? If we do not take this great leap forward, it would be a great leap backwards in the sense of simply exchanging, as it were, one level of traditional dualism, plus versus the opposite, black versus white, east versus male versus female. We have to go beyond this historical entrapment into dualism if we are going to make a true great leap into the future possibility of being multidimensional beings.
But I was going to say, for all those who still have fear of what might come in 2012 or shortly thereafter, the whole purpose of life is really one of evolution. So even if the physical matter realm somehow gets, wiped out, or your city ends up with a major earthquake and you have, hundreds of thousands. I mean, the important thing is, where's the consciousness? Because we don't believe that you're only here for one time, and that's the end of it. I don't think anyone should believe that. Really, I mean, there's been a lot of documented evidence of people who can remember their past lives and have gone back and done the research and found exactly what they remember in this life that took place 100 years ago.
Yep.
I mean, so there's no doubt that we are ongoing. And so the most important thing is not to worry about all these little details, but the most important thing is to worry about how we can evolve into our true mission in life and then take that mission with us into wherever we are to go next. And I think that's the key.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that was, and this is a great segue, because I know we wanted to get more into consciousness and such. And I think it was interesting, something going back a little bit earlier concerning what you said was in your book, as well as a census about the contact and elevation of consciousness coming through dreams as well as visions and such. And I thought it was interesting when we were talking about extraterrestrials, because even myself, being a natural dreamer, lucid dreamer, when that even affected me, because it was kind of at one point I had this experience where it was it's kind of no, this is real. And it's oh, okay. And so even when you're used to seeing extraterrestrials in one's dreams, it doesn't matter. At one point, it switches over a little bit. And then I think it's really interesting, too, about a lot of the data coming in and stuff about the sun switching, because like we talked about earlier, in terms of some of my own visions of the future, one of the most profound ones where I saw the most positive change going on and everything, I recognized that the sun looked different. And so it was interesting that I'm hearing that more and more. I thought that was kind of more of a metaphor, but it's interesting that it might not be entirely metaphor. So,
well, one of the things from the Keys also, I just like to put this out, is that the Keys said that the sun was a variable star, and this is back in the 70s, and NASA always thought every 11 years, actually, you go through a solar minimum cycle. And so we were supposed to be in the solar maximum cycle now around 2010, 2011. And because we're not there, now NASA has come out and said the sun is a variable star. So it's confirmed the Keys of Enoch. And that's why everyone's a little bit concerned about the level of solar flares, because it's kind of held off. It's kind of built up in a sense, and they think it's going to be like massive. But the problem is that a lot of the solar flares can go any other direction. As long as they don't come towards the Earth, it's cool. It's not an issue. And
so for those of you who are interested in the book, please write to us, www.keysofenoch.org. And again, it's a book that challenges the traditional paradigms of science and philosophy, but actually is a book that respatializes you through the fantastic use of language, new vocabulary, and what we'll call cosmographic pictures that show how we are working with totality. We have with this also a plethora of music, CDs, and worldwide experiences that would be very important for the inner change that must go along, because you can have a whole stack of books, but unless you have, as it were, an inner attunement, an inner awakening and raising of consciousness, this is all simply external information. The heart has to be elevated. A sense of renewal has to be there, regenesis, and a sense of the ecumenical embrace of the greater humanity through the divine spark, which is in every human being, has to be addressed. And this is the importance of our work, is to see that we do have options on the new frontier for this change to take place that will affect the lives, but also the future of all of us if we work together.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're hoping to actually showcase some of both Drs. Hurtak's music here at some point in the show, so we'll get a chance to check that out. And it was kind of fairly impromptu, but I think we got a way that we're going to work this out just fantastic. We'll work it into our discussion concerning the elevation of consciousness and where humanity will be going in our second hour. We actually are coming up to the break here pretty soon. But I don't know if there's any other thoughts that we might want to kind of.
Do we have any questions from our audience?
Actually, it seems like our audience is just very appreciative, and we're getting comments about how much they enjoy the Keys of Enoch website and the information that's there. So it's really cool. We have a great audience here today, actually. So thank everyone for joining us here.
Well, I know if we can talk a little bit more about 2012 for a minute. I mean, It's important to realize that what's going to take place is not only, changes, we'll say, from the Earth, but supposedly the planet aligns with this area of the Milky Way called the Dark Rift. I think some of you are familiar with that. But if you really study the legends of Popol Vuh, you find out that there were the previous gods or kings that had been trapped in this Dark Rift, but then the two boys end up figuring out how to get beyond the underworld, how to play the games enough to win. Mm-hmm. And then when they were able to win in the underworld, they were able to release all the old kings and all the old stuff and literally find liberation. Mm-hmm. So I don't think when we get into this dark rift, which some people call the womb to the underworld, we have to be worried about it. We have to realize that if we're like the two boys and we've learned how to play the game and we know how to conquer this negativity within us and around us, we can actually liberate the whole planet. And I think we can play with time travel, we can liberate past, present, and then, of course, go into the future. Yeah. So I think it's really important to realize that 2012 is really just a stepping stone for all of us getting our act together and perhaps also meeting our cosmic brothers and sisters in space.
We've also several films available, one called Extraterrestrial Realities, and we have had the opportunity to work with some of the leading film people throughout the world, as well as some of the leading scientists in other countries of the world who see this as an opportunity whereby, through hopefully a ambassador that will be appointed from the United Nations to work with the cosmic cultures, that a whole new type of astronomy, a new type of cosmology, a whole new type of consciousness development unifying the great religions with the social sciences will allow us to understand that we are not simply debating this any longer, but we are ready as a planetary humanity to move into the next chapter of the Book of Life.
Yeah.
And so that great challenge unites us. And this is what we believe in the words ad astra, to the stars. As we look with eyes into the heavens, seeing these billions upon billions of stars, we not simply see stars, but we see celestial opportunities of engagement, of experience, of what the ancient biblical as well as Sanskrit scriptures call the cosmic dance. Psalm 150.
So we have a great future.
Absolutely, and we'll get into how we factor into that future and how our minds manifest all of that in this next hour. And for right now, we're going to go ahead and take our musical break. So everyone go ahead and grab a drink, get comfy, and then head on back, and we'll get into some more awesome information. So rock on, everyone. Hello, everyone. Welcome back for our second hour here on Universal Truth Evolution on blogtalkradio.com. We're here once again with Drs. J.J. Hurtak and Dr. Desiree Hurtak talking about, we were talking a little extraterrestrial fun this last hour. Now we're going to get into relating this in terms of human consciousness and really just where we're going. You know, I think that's really the big question these days, because everyone is hearing all these different. Honestly, we're hearing a lot more problems than we are solutions. So that's why we try to do here on Universal Truth Evolution is offer something, at least ideas, because no one can really tell you what to do. That's your choice you have to make on your own. So the most we can do for one another is open up possibilities of perception and awareness. So with that, it's probably a good place to jump into some of the subjects that we want to talk about in there.
Well, let me start off by saying that this is a whole new area, the importance of consciousness, opening the mind to what could be called the reality of non-local consciousness, that we're not simply all here inside a physical body apparatus. We have a body, but we're not a body. Our consciousness is multidimensional, and in our studies with colleagues at Stanford Research Institute, such as Russell Targ and others, papers were done back in the early 70s. Studies were made, including those subjects connected with astronaut Mitchell. Something on the order of $10-20 million was spent looking very carefully at the work of how the mind could project itself to distant targets, retrieve information from those distant targets, some of which were 1,000, 2,000, 4,000 kilometers away, bring that information back and reassemble, even to the point of very specific notation, all of the details that you would normally see if you were right there at that location. A book was recently published called The End of Suffering by this speaker and Russell Targ, showing some of the declassified government pictures on these experiences of mind over matter reality. So we are at a threshold of no longer debating this issue. It's been, I guess, on more than 800,000 downloads throughout Mother Earth regarding other areas of experimentation, showing that we are working with what could be called the awakenings of a higher consciousness.
But the real question is, and what's still out there in terms of debate, is Dr. Tech said, go there, see something, and bring that information back. But what the scientists really are looking at is that there's no going there, even with the speed of light and coming back, that it seems to be almost instantaneous reality. And so this is called, in quantum mechanics, quantum physics, non-locality, where you can affect objects at a distance. And, it's good possibility that our consciousness and what the Keys of Enoch tell us, that we're biotransducers, where we're constantly part of this greater waveform of the universe. And so every part of everything is interconnected with who you are. And it's just a matter of the body gives us the illusion that we're limited, that we're restricted. And as soon as you start going out, and that's why dreams are so powerful. And I like the movies, of course, Inception, which you probably enjoyed. It was a little bit violent in a certain sense, but the idea that you can bring back information, and of course they have the idea that you can implant information as well. That's a little bit more difficult, but it's Hollywood. But even Avatar, here's this guy that had a problem, and he was still able to go into, through the consciousness mind in a certain sense, this other body and relate to other things in other spaces. So that's what's really, really, really exciting. That
we like this movie because one of the great technical geniuses working with James Cameron was Vince Pace, who worked with us when we went to Japan back in the late 90s to do an exploration of the pyramids at Yonaguni under the ocean. There are these fantastic landforms, and we did a movie with the Japanese, and Vince Pace was one of the cameramen. But
what I think is important, and I know you dream, Jerry, is that we don't have to have the Avatar program to go and visit some of these other civilizations. That's what people have to realize, that you can actually go and be. And what's getting really interesting is people are also going into that space, right? You can go into other spaces, but you can also go into other times. You can go back in time, and you can go forwards in time. And the work of Russell Targ, he was actually playing with not super far in time, because it seems when you go too far, there becomes various possibilities, various options. But a little bit, forward in time. I know I used to grow up with my girlfriend, Susan, and she would say to me about her dream, and then about 3 weeks later, she goes, Desi, remember I told you about that dream? That's exactly what we're doing now. So she used to always do that. I mean, that was constant for her. So, we can do that. And then we can bring it back and see, if we want to, play that role, go out and do that exact thing. Was that a positive experience or was it a negative experience? Should we change to another possibility or should we keep that? I do want to say in our work with the consciousness field in connection with quantum mechanics that it tells us that right now, whether we're thinking of food, whether we're thinking of guys or girls, whether we're thinking of whatever, that there's infinite amount of possibilities available to us at every moment. And the mind, and this is all part of quantum physics, the mind reduces the thought. This is some of the work, especially of Roger Penrose and Stuart Hameroff. And we are the ones that choose which thought to reduce. Now, most people, and I say this all the time, choose the negative thought.
Yep.
And they can just as easily, and that's the whole way they need to shift in the paradigm shift to a new reality, choose the positive thought. Choose something that takes them to the next level beyond the negativity.
So we must be more than deconstructionists and recognize that the ordinary reality we perceive is not one universe. There's the harmony phases of movements of an indefinite number of universes, both the physical as well as the non-physical, that we're beginning to recognize. And the keys of Enoch really begin with the realization these are 64 biocomputer keys given to we as human participants in this particular consciousness time zone. Consciousness defines its own field of operation, and as we begin to expand our consciousness, we realize there are other time zones, there are other timelines that we can connect with, and we are no longer simply the host to three-dimensional reality. We no longer have to play out the script that's handed to us by our parents or grandparents, saying, think only this direction of linear time, operate only with these concepts according to a chain of information, and the great chain of being, or a train that has a series of railroad cars that run a certain type of track system. No, we have a networking possibility of reaching into the minds of every human being on this planet, and as we saw through the research back in the early 70s at Stanford Research Institute, we can reach and connect with the minds of the universe, the great minds, the great thinkers.
Right. As I said, Einstein used to do this. We knew he used to stay at this house in Palm Springs that our friends... Which was
Marion Davies' old home.
Right. Our friends owned it actually later on. And there was this beautiful platform, and supposedly he would go up every morning and just meditate. And we encourage people to meditate because it allows you to get beyond the chaos of this reality that you're confronted with every day, and to put your mind in a state. It doesn't have to be, we're not into Zen, you don't have to think of nothing. I mean, but think of positive things. Think of heavenly realms. I mean, bring in those greater dimensions of thought, and then that clears your body, that heals your body, because you're also aligning yourself. And Dr. Hurtak talks about something called Axiatonal lines, which some of the new healing techniques have picked up on, such as the reconnection Eric Pearl, that you actually have this kind of overself entity. In fact, our new book, which will be out by the end of the year, is called The Overself, and you attach to that original source of who you are. And we are the physical manifestation of that down here, but the perfect blueprint, the perfect energy is in that overself. Yes. And that's how we work. And so in a sense, it's not reincarnation. This is something that we often talk about. People talk about reincarnation, and I did mention it, but in a sense, it's the overself that projects down into different realities. Exactly. So theoretically, the overself could even project you into something 100 years back. You could actually go backwards, or you could go forwards, or you could go here, So these are all possibilities, because that's how the overself works. It's learning. It's a growing entity, too. It's an evolving entity.
Absolutely.
So you have various terms. For example, you use Axiatonal lines, which according to the Keys of Enoch are vibratory lines which connect levels of human electrochemical activity with astrobiological circuits that span the solar system and are connected with resonating star systems. In other words, it is an extension of really the acupuncture field that we have, which is probably the oldest field of medicine practiced on Mother Earth. And you also use the
term
expression overself, which is really according to the Keys of Enoch, the pre-existent higher body of light. That is to say, superluminal light, which exists for spiritual, physical beings prior to their incarnation. This body of light domes with realized physical humanity, which has completed the synthesis of the 5 inner matter energy vehicles.
Right, so ultimately we'll have total contact with our overself body.
So
That's
what this
the
is basically a new ontology of science, but it's also connecting the very foundations of the historic philosophy of the Tree of Life with the realization that we are not simply one physical body of flesh and blood, but we have other energy vehicles.
Right, and these aren't necessarily matter vehicles. When we say body, we're not talking about matter.
Well, what 5 bodies would these be then?
Well, that's a whole different reality. We also feel that around us we are operating constantly around with 5 bodies.
The electromagnetic?
The epikinetic, and these are the physical bodies.
Which is the musical vibratory.
But we also have something called an ecobody, and I don't want to get too far out for the audience, but that means, it's what we're talking about, that we can be here, and we can actually, because the overself is not limited to one manifestation.
So it's a body of multiple relativity.
Right. So we can actually start experiencing ourselves, if we're enlightened, in other realities, even other planets, if we're experiencing them right now. So we can tap into that mind. So you start expanding the idea that our mind stuck here in this little cranial sacral situation is really just like a pea pod, and it can really blossom into being everywhere. And it is really everywhere. It's just not really functioning in that capacity, but we can do it. And I think dreams, as Jerry, you have had many of these, really allow you to release that three-dimensionality into other realities.
As well as show you that your creative self can be in many dimensions simultaneously. And then we have the body of bioluminescence within, which is the firing of the electrochemical to a point that there are actual energies that are discharged around the body or synthesized with other energy fields. And the ultimate synthesis leads to a type of body, we call it that of superluminal light, what is called in the ancient Hebraic literature the Zohar body, or the higher body of splendor, or in the area of Coptic Christian teaching, the body of Christ consciousness, the ability to realize the universality of the divine and the human coming together in partnership.
Yeah, it's interesting. So I had a question about the Axiatonal lines. So does the overself use those too?
Well, it's a connection between us and the overself body. I mean, it goes throughout space, it goes throughout all realities, but the true essence is from the overself. And so, to restore your physical body, I believe the real healing takes place by repositioning and restoring and renewing all the energies that you kind of destroyed for the 30 or 50 years you've been on this planet to what the original blueprint was from your overself body.
But there are various levels of the overself. So the overself could be the higher state of consciousness, where all your thought forms are collected, your seat of consciousness, that is elevated above the seventh chakra, or the seventh seal as is known in the literature of the West. But then you have the higher Christed overself, or the overself that has received, as it were, regenesis, its spiritual identity. In the East, the Buddha-like consciousness, or higher states of resonance.
So the overself itself actually evolves into a greater consciousness collective called the Christ overself body.
And then you have orders or levels of sonship or daughterhood, namely where you are connected with schools of teachers. That leads, of course, to the Elohistic or the divine blueprint.
But the Axiatonal lines are very important, especially in restoring the body, because let's face it, I mean, you get out there, whether it's the food we eat, the air we breathe, all the other aspects, even just the emotions. The emotions can do a lot to really destroying your mental body and your physical body. And so, how do we restore that? I mean, meditation, but where does that energy get really renewed and restored? It has to be a connection.
So it comes from the top down. It is the higher states. that you reconnect with. But the reconnective spark is really through a divine grace and a divine self-realization moment coming together.
So could you say that overself, the perceived higher one, would that be like the higher self, or could you synonymize those to a certain extent?
Exactly. You could say that they are interchangeable in the terms of the plain-spoken use of the term, the higher self or the overself, but that overself itself is going through a stage of spiritual evolution. Some beings that manifest on Mother Earth may have higher states of their overself or higher self already developed, so they do not have to go through a university education to know the basics of connecting with the divine mind or the source.
And this is why we really know that we're not just hybrids of some extraterrestrial beings. We really wouldn't have that kind of higher self.
That
would need to abduct human subjects to take their cell tissue and put us basically through
but you know, it would mean that we would evolve from the ooze of the earth, and then someone would have fixed us up to make us a little bit better. But that's really not who we are. And so that's really the cosmology we're offering, is that, you know, it really is this higher. And I think you've experienced some of this, right, in some of your dream states?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the different, I think it's interesting because how we talked about coming to a census about, in particular, these different bodies, the different perceptions of dimension, because as you're talking there and relating these different bodies, it's like a lot of people aren't familiar with the fact that we can, like, literally traverse these bandwidths with that body, and solve and heal ourselves and do a lot of other things. So it's good that we start developing that vocabulary, the common word use, and start coming to a census, so that way we can build. And so I think this is great. And because I'm seeing even in the chat room, we're having a lot of this dialogue, and a lot of the questions is like, does over self mean the higher self? And so once we start able to relate, we start able to build and really kind of go ahead together in, one fashion.
Yeah, I think
if I can continue just to read a little bit more from the vocabulary of the Keys of Enoch, one of the several overself vehicles in the Shekinah or Shekinah, the spiritual universe of creation, leading to new levels of growth within the activity of total deity. The exact nature of the overself relationship is open-ended. However, the immediate overself hierarchy includes going from self-realization, or the synthesis of many of the energy vehicles we have, to the overself, which is super metaprogramming, to the Christed overself, where we realize that we are part of a divine image of sonship and daughterhood, and these are advanced into orders of working with spiritual masters, teachers of light, ultimately civilizations that have advanced into the superluminal, and ultimately the paradise sons and daughters manifest themselves with each of us who've gone into a higher state of spiritual scientific understanding.
Right, so this is really part of the new book, which I said is just about finished and will be out by the end of the year. And it talks about the fact that, part of our work is to activate the grids on planet Earth, activate the chakra areas within our body, really make sure we heal our body and become in resonance with these higher aspects of ourselves. And that resonant energy is really what is able to take us into new dimensions. And I know one of the things we were talking about with Jerry before the show was, what's going to happen really, say at some point, of course, either at our death or time of ascension, whatever you want to look at it. And the keys talk about something called the Kiliocosm, which is 1,000 space-time openings, which means, he was talking about possibilities. You want to say a little bit about this?
I said, because I get asked too about what I see, 2012 and beyond, and how I say it's hard for me to really kind of put a label on it, because part of the manifestation, or the catalyst to the manifestation, was pure possibility itself. So it's kind of like it can go anywhere. And so it gets, to me, that's why I saw it was so important for us to realize what we want and not get stuck on what we don't, and not feel that we're bound by, karma or chromosomes, for that matter, because I did just see really cool stuff, because and it didn't matter about, one's perception of right, wrong, good, bad. It has to do with universal harmony and what that really means. And so that's kind of what it seems to be moving towards one way or another. And you can see everyone really wants the same things. We don't want to have to struggle to survive. We want to realize our divine selves, one can say. we want to be more independent. So, and that's what I'm seeing, and how we manifest that, though. That I could see what you're saying is that. What was your expression again? I'm sorry.
Heliocosm.
Yeah.
So it's 1,000 possibilities. I mean, that's just a numerical symbol, of course. But to all the possibilities that exist in all the realms of creation, even multidimensional, 24th dimension, whatever you want to call it, that's all open to us. And the thing that will stop us the most is our limited mind. If we stick to the fact that it can't happen here, we can't do it, it's, we're stuck here, there's nothing else, then we actually judge ourselves. We cut ourselves off. We're not able to make that next step because it really is a thought process. It really is a consciousness reality. And if we and we've talked about that, of course, there's the secret, put your thoughts there and you can manifest it. Of course, it's not that easy. But, the consciousness really has to be there first. It really does. You can't be negative all the time. You won't get anywhere.
We've illustrated this in a new book called The 72 Living Divine Names of the Most High. And these are cosmograms or pictures that illustrate the Kiliocosm concept that we can think multidimensionally, illustrated in color. We go back and we look at the ancient Hebrew, Aramaic, Greek, and other ancient expressions for the divine and show that reflection upon the symbols of these divine elevated to levels of seeing the permutations allows our consciousness to expand, and we begin to cultivate really this divine spark that we carry within ourselves. And the dialogue between the human and the divine becomes more than just a label. It's an actual visual and verbal experience within the mind's eye. Some years ago, talking to Roger Penrose and not Stuart Hameroff, but Karl Prebraun at one of the Quantum Mind conferences in Austria, we had a chance to really ask what they feel is the missing link, because the normal circuitry of the mind doesn't permit the mind to go into these higher states of vibratory exchange according to traditional neurophysics. And they felt that this orchestration had to take place according to some vibratory charge that was going through the body. We would call this language of light, the ability to speak in a type of higher vibratory level.
So that actually takes us almost to our segue, because what we feel, there's always the dichotomy in science between a particle and a wave. Well, we feel the particle is only the space-time right this second, that technically everything is a wave. Yeah. Everything is interconnected. And so what's the cosmic mind or the divine mind? Well, we're interconnected with that greater waveform. Of course, there's a clarity of thought. There's a multiplicity of thought in the divine mind than we can achieve at this point. But that doesn't mean we can't tap in, because if we're biotransducers, instead of tapping in to something going on down the street, in Watts or Harlem or something like that, why don't we tap into something that's going on in the 10th dimension, with the angelic messengers, with the Lords of Light? And those possibilities are there. We just don't do it. Yeah. So we really have to shift. And one of the ways we shift that is to use music. Yes. And music and vibration. And we incorporate some sacred names, and you can do this in the Sanskrit. You can actually do it in the Chinese. We claim that there's 5 sacred languages that really help. The reason why they're sacred is because our bodies will attune to some of these divine names and these resonant frequencies.
In all of the energy centers of the body, called in Eastern science the chakra wheels, or in the Western science the seals of spiritual reality, are synchronized into simultaneity.
Now, we've gone to Egypt, and we've also gone to the pyramids of Yucatan, and with permission, we've actually taken resonant acoustic signatures of the rooms there using pink noise and white noise. I know you as a musician understand what that is, which means you do a sweep and you figure out where the greatest resonant frequency is.
Showing that these rooms were actually scored to amplify certain musical experiences. Oh, wow. They're not just happenstance structures put together under a roof, but no, there are actual areas of sound vibration. We would call creating a soundscape, a vibratory resonance through which the participants, no matter how imperfect they sing or chant, can actually feel an energy rush through their body, and that activity producing an energy through the area of the pineal gland, the pituitary system, all connect with we call in the Sanskrit traditions, the turiya, the system of the inner circuit is activated, and you have an outpouring of light and creativity.
Now, one of our favorite places to go to is Tikal. This is in Guatemala, and it's known as the City of Sound. In fact, it has the mathematical number of 144, which is the 12 mathematics. And what's really cool is you could stand at the bottom of these huge pyramids, I mean, right in the center of this complex, the central complex, and someone could be at the very top of the pyramid, and I'm talking like at least 5 stories tall, 4 to 5 stories tall, and the sound, someone could just be talking at the bottom, and the sound can be heard at the top. That's the resonant understanding that they had of these geometries and complexes.
We also had this in the Great Pyramid in Egypt in 1997. I'm sharing you, Jerry, a picture that you can explain to the audience worldwide. But this brilliant golden light manifested itself after we were able to reach a point of vibration that actually exploded suddenly and created a standing columnar wave right there in the Grand Gallery of the Great Pyramid of Egypt.
Yeah, this is the ascending passage, as they call it, in the Great Pyramid.
So suddenly there was a point at which the sound resonance was amplified. And you can hear this on some of the tapes that we have available, such as the Living Capstone. Right. So those of you who are interested, please write to us or go online and go to keysofenoch.org and scroll down.
And we also have spiritage.org. And we're going to be playing, I think right now, if Jerry's ready, one of our songs from our sister of the Academy. Her name is Anya. She's done several of the CDs, and you can get samples of that at spiritage.org. And this is called Pillars of Ancient Future. And I believe there's several words in there we'll discuss after the music. But one of them, I believe, is Adonai, which stands for Lord. It's a very common term used in Hebrew and Christianity oftentimes.
And also all throughout the Middle East, the various cultures that refer to the presence of the divine, the personal awakening to the divine.
Very, very interesting. Yeah, we'll play the music right now. I just want to make a comment on this picture. It's pretty remarkable because it looks as if this passageway is like lit up with like some massive halogen lights or something from the top.
And they weren't.
Yeah, which I'm sure isn't the case. So I mean, it's flooded. It's really flooded. It's not subtle. It's very bright, and it's very golden, and which I find is interesting, especially about the resonance chambers of the pyramid, because it's almost like the more and more we're finding out about them, it's almost like they're ascension amusement parks, you know? It's
exactly.
So, but yeah, then in terms of music and you know, matter versus wave, and you know, you can say that matter is a standing wave. So, and then we see those principles being applied in the binaural, sound and such. But yeah, we're gonna play a little bit of the music available at spiritage.org. Bear with us. This is totally we are piloting a program here and trying to actually play this through the studio setup here. So we'll do our best. Hopefully you'll be able to hear everything okay as soon as I get everything set up.
So this is from our, as I said, our associate, Anya, and she's just really tunes into some of these ancient expressions. She does her homework, and we also help her with some of the sacred expressions connected with our teachings and our work.
Yeah, very cool.
And really, it's all meditative, because it really needs to put you, I don't know if you know the work of Dr. Emoto, but, you know, he's shown the different music vibrations and what really transforms the water. Our body is about 75% water, and by using the right key vibrations, you can actually make the water within your body like this beautiful crystalline structure. And if you use negative thoughts and hatred and stuff, it actually becomes muddy and yucky. So it's very important to realize the thoughts that you put in, the music that you put around you is all very, very important to your own consciousness.
Yeah, cool. All right, with that, we'll play the music. So sit back and enjoy, everyone, and allow that consciousness to flow.
So this is a taste of honey.
And it might have been a little slow for some of you, but we got the birds chirping outside the door here, so
awesome.
they enjoyed it.
Yeah. That was great.
So we have also another website,
Yes.
the Keys of Enoch, and we have there the Egyptian music.
Right, keysofenoch.org, and if you go under music, and we have also a lot of new CDs.
For the great composers and instrumentalists that we work with. In fact, we could say that even Carlos Santana said that his Supernatural album was based upon the keys, some of the energy and the concepts that flowed through him at that time. And this type of music is not limited to only one area of musical experience. We span the spectrum.
Right, and so actually the Keys of Enoch are also Keys of Enoch and Metatron, and this is something, of course, that Carlos had picked up on and felt he had been receiving some energy. And I know one of the questions you had mentioned that had come up is what is Enoch, or who is Enoch, who is Metatron, and even who is Melchizedek, which is another name in our book. And in
the great mystical traditions of the ancient Near East, in the Judaic and the early Christian, Enoch, as well as even the Sufi Enoch or EBEs, stands as one of the great messengers, or one of the great angelic beings that manifests a human transposed through his divine human nature into a higher level of celestial initiation.
Right, so after living a certain period of time, supposedly the divine took him into the heavens, showed him certain things, he came back, wrote about it, and then he left once again. And that was supposed to be in connection with this angel before the throne, who's known as Metatron or El Shaddai. And it gets very complicated, but I'll just summarize the fact that there's a connection between Enoch and Metatron. Many people think it's the same, but that's like concretizing everyone into a few entities up in the universe when there's thousands and thousands and thousands. But we're all interconnected. So the order of Metatron is connected with Enoch, who's the scribe. And that's why many people also equate Thoth in the Egyptian, who's also the scribe. If you remember him, he's the ibis bird, and his little long beak is something like a
scribal instrument. But in our work with the Keys of Enoch, we're talking about a cosmology that deals with the tree of life, that deals with the authentic prophetic traditions raised to a new horizon of seeing as where the new sciences and the new levels of consciousness that we are interconnecting with.
And we're also seeing as these beings are being real. And I think that's one thing that many people have ignored, that maybe Jesus rose from the dead. I mean, if you're a Christian, but, what's he doing up there, And
it's the transformation of the Christ, though, into the multi-levels of divinity that leads to the realization, the very powerful realization of the cosmic Christ. And so this is something that is very, very overwhelming for many, and people think, well, just the historic Jesus leaves off here, and that's the end of the story. But we're explaining that the keys give us the higher cosmology.
Right, and so these beings are operating in and out of various dimensions. They're doing not only work in helping people on this planet, say 2,000 or 6,000 years ago, but also now. But they're also helping other planets. They're helping other dimensions, because when you leave here, there's other work to be done. There's a vast and awesome universe. And many people also, with Melchizedek, who's Melchizedek? Well, supposedly he was fatherless and motherless. Now that means, and he manifested here, and Abraham met him. Now, there's probably a whole order of Melchizedekians, but that means that these beings can actually materialize here if they want to. And that's really exciting, because they can materialize in your bedroom at night, or they can materialize and protect you when you're driving on the highway or whatever. So, these beings exist.
Well, let me ask you, as your husband, taking on, shall we say, the question of a skeptic, how can we discern the beings? Because,
Well, we say you can feel their divine love, and this is really something, because you can feel energy, especially the more and more sensitized you get. And if they're there to really help, if they're there to really,
But are there affirmations, are there active words or verbs of communication? Because God is a verb in some instance of an elevated sense of mind resonance.
Well, this is something that Carlos Santana picked up on from the Keys of Enoch. Some of you might have seen him when he got his Grammy some years back for Supernatural.
And he used the sacred words.
He stood up on stage and said, Kadosh, 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 Adonai Sabaoth. Now, a typical Orthodox Jewish person who also knows that expression says it a little bit differently, but we find
kadosh, kadosh, kadosh.
But we find that vibration is actually very powerful.
What if they were German and said heilig, heilig, heilig?
Well, we like the original vibration.
Or Italian and said sanctus, sanctus, sanctus. I mean, all of these are expressions of a triplet of energy, body, mind, and spirit, put into active resonance. And Sarah right now is looking at this book of these remarkable pictures of the cosmograms showing the sacred geometries that connect with musical vibration, that connect with positive intention and positive extension of the mind's energy. And as you begin to open up a whole new field of energy exchange and experience, you begin to realize that your body is a musical instrument, that there is a fantastic symphony of sound that you can connect with. It's not simply limited to the Beatles any more than the Peruvian flute players in the Andes. You have an opportunity as a citizen of the universe to seize the opportunity you now have to become aware of the orchestration of a higher music that can flow through your body, connecting you with the higher dimensions of intelligence far beyond the extraterrestrial.
And the ancients understood this. I don't know if you've ever heard this, Jerry, but they're actually healing flutes from Peru. And there's a series of flutes, I think it's about 7, and they each have almost a singular tone, but the way you play them, the ancients, the Incas and pre-Incas, believed that you could heal the body just with sound vibration, just from these flutes. And so it's showing us if we are waveforms and we add the right vibration, we can actually change our consciousness. We can change our physical matter. And this is the work of Gurdjieff. He's taken DNA and he's put frequencies into DNA. And there's been amazing things that have happened to it because it reacts to frequencies, reacts to sound.
So, Jerry, what is your experience looking at the pictograms, the pictures, the geometries, and also the text of visualization, meditation, and expansion?
It's interesting because there is a sort of you can say purity that resonates from the image, and actually just the information. I could see why how it can be sort of associated with a lot of the feelings that one might get in a temple or church or such. And it's cool to have the visualization of the vibration as it puts into context the fact that, like we're saying, that if everything is truly comprised of energy and light, what is light but waveform, then all the various fluctuations of light and all these other energetic bursts happen with our body are a symphonic sound. Because our heart beats at this time, our blood rushes through our veins at that time, which causes reactions that release energy. And so, it all is music, and I think it's cool to have a visual representation of this music and be able to relate it to our bodies and have a technique along with it. So. Right,
and the reason that Santana used the Kadosh, 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 Adonai Sabaoth is because we also feel that there's a resonance attunement even outside our bodies, even though that's, of course, extremely important, but that it resonates into the heavens and is almost like a telephone number that you're calling, a certain frequency you're calling to bring in these energies to help the planet. So I know people in very scary situations, say in South America or something, that have used this expression and been totally protected. So there's like a field of energy that comes.
So it's one expression for the Brotherhood of Light, namely the angelic teachers of light, to put you into a type of syntony of mind, spirit, and physical circumstance. And those of you who may be interested in this program on that particular text, be aware that it's available in a variety of languages. It's a very important text, well illustrated.
Yeah, this is 72 sacred names with 72 color pictures of really multidimensional pictures. And all the words that we're introducing actually come from a biblical background, but it takes it another step forward. You can start seeing how the heavens are really multidimensional, how the cosmic mind is multidimensional. It's not just whatever you think of that it is. We're going to introduce you to about another 50 things that add to it.
Is this available on Keys of Enoch?
Yeah, it is.
Okay.
So, again, we reach out to you recognizing that this is part of the work that we've been doing with leading musicians from Gilberto Gil in Brazil to many of the great composers of Germany, Russia, Japan, who are now beginning to really work with musical exchange programs. And again, we want to be able to opened the doors of the global commons into a type of orchestration of how each of us can raise human consciousness quickly through the language of celebration, i.e. the musical, spiritual synthesis that we have already within us.
Yes.
Whether you take the ancient texts of the Near East or the Far East, there's a type of musical score embedded in sacred expressions.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I want to say something else that the Academy for Future Science organization has put out on the Internet, and that's a website called healtheplanet.org. And this is inviting all of our guests here that if you have somebody that needs healing, check with them first, because we don't want to, we try to keep it a little bit, private for some people. But, ask for a prayer for them. If you see things going on the planet that need, help, like we just did some prayers for Egypt.
And Brazil.
But right now, of course, for Egypt, which is, thank goodness that's at least step forward in terms of change. And we're hoping that's a positive change for archaeologists as well. But, add your prayers there if you want to say something about what you feel about Egypt. So it's a place for the planet, it's a place for individuals, and we're going to keep growing the site, I hope, according to all your needs that you want to do, because putting energy out there is critical. And I think that's important, that, don't sit back, don't let someone else do it. Get out there, do it yourself, do it in a group, do it in a family, find what we call the Sangha, find your spiritual family, and you're much more powerful together. Yeah. That's very important. And, join us on the web at healtheplanet.net as well as keysofenoch.org.
So what's the bottom line? Our physical universe does not exist independent of the thoughts of each individual, each of us. We conceive and we construct ourselves and we construct each other as consciousness becomes aware of its greater power. So this is a moment of awakening, a very powerful awakening of what the power of the mind can do, the power of prayer can do, the power of musical energy that is put into the hearts and minds of people throughout Mother Earth can do. This is the whole, shall we say, imperative to realize that we can change the course of evolution from violence into positive compassion and harmony. And this is what we see in every individual, a little bit of St. Francis, a little bit of Mother Teresa, a little bit of Gandhi. This whole idea of realizing through peace, not violence, through a higher harmonic of energy, we can show our cosmic counterparts that we are willing to work as a humanity, as peace builders of a future society that will make contact.
And Jerry had asked us, I know, earlier about what we felt about Egypt since we've been there and spent a lot of time there. And I said it can go either way. Many archaeologists, including ourselves, have asked the Antiquities Department, please let us take a little fiber optic cable under the left paw of the Sphinx where this remote sensing radar or ground penetrating radar has shown us that there might be a cavity. And they haven't really wanted us to do that yet. So we're hoping with this new regime change, and of course it'll take a while, that they will allow really the Giza Plateau and all of Egypt from Aswan to Alexandria to be totally opened up, and then we can really find out what's underneath there. And we think there's a vast array. We know from our own research that under the Giza Plateau, there's actually more underground than on the top. And we were one of the first to go into the Tomb of Osiris, which is 100...
We actually found it through using musical acoustics and ground-penetrating radar back in 1997, 2 years before Hawass announced that his team had found it. But then he put a prologue to his Fox television announcement that there had been a team 2 years before, indirect reference to our work. So this is, again, why Desiree and I want to highlight the importance of the obelisk, these great statues in Egypt, and the symbols of music that is connected with the headdress. If you look very carefully at the headdress of the Egyptian teachers, not the pharaohs, but the actual teachers behind the teachers, you will see that the shape is that of the face of a dolphin, the head of the dolphin. And the dolphin, as we know through our work with interspecies communication, represents, as it were, the most sophisticated mind in the oceans of the planet. And so this dolphin-like headdress that became the model of the Mitar, according to some anthropologists, is a sign that there was a higher language of music and tonality that the great master architects of Egypt had with other levels of cosmic civilization.
Right, and think about it, that the dolphins work through these sonar sonic vibrations, and some of the work even with Colin Andrews in the crop circles, he's looking at ultrasounds or higher frequencies. And I don't know about you, Jerry, but I've actually heard sounds in my head from time to time, and it almost like the sounds become pictures.
Mm-hmm,
so there's
mm-hmm.
a connection between sound and the imaging that we can pick up in our brains. And I think this is some of the levels of communication that these higher levels of intelligence give to us from time to time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think dolphins have a special place here in Universal Truth Evolution due to our founder and his association with dolphins. So that was a cool synchronicity there. And yeah, they're in terms of sound carrying imagery, I mean, that's essentially what sonar is. So yeah, absolutely. It's a whole other dimensional perception. We actually do have a caller if we wanted to take
Okay, we can try that.
Want to try to take a
caller? I also wanted to bring part 1 and part 2 together, because part 1 we talked about the extraterrestrial side, and part 2 we're dealing with consciousness and music.
Mm-hmm.
And Steven Spielberg, in his great epic film called Close Encounters of the Third Kind, has a musical scenario at the end where the great scientific minds of NASA and the aerospace community are reaching out to the unknown visitors through certain musical signals.
Yeah.
I knew Dr. Hynek personally, who was a stand-in in that particular film, that he was a real investigator behind the science with very impeccable credentials at Harvard University, also with the Air Force, who knew that there's a cosmic language that deals with vibration. And our work also deals with something that is far beyond simplified use of musical chord structure. We realize that there's a whole new music tonality that we as a human race can move into. As we raise our consciousness, we can tap into more subtle ranges of sound that we found in our computer work at the Great Pyramid were there in the stone vibrations and modulations that were released.
And with sound, also thought. Well, let's hear from the caller. Let's see if he's...
Sure. Okay. Caller, thank you for waiting so patiently. You're on the air here with us in Dr. Hurtak here.
Yes, hello. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, hi. My name is John. I'm from the Campbell Keys group. Hello, Dr. Hurtaks.
Oh, hi, John.
Yes. Very interesting program as usual. The question I have is, do either of you see a time in the near future when the political, economic, religious, scientific, and healing leaders of the world will be people of goodwill with a vision of the real purpose for being on Earth? And if you see that transformation occurring, when do you see it happening, and how will this come about? It seems to me that this is going to be a real hurdle to get over to get into the golden age, if it is going to come.
Well, first of all, is this John Francis who wrote the Attitude?
Yes, it is.
So I just like to start with that, if I can, and just say that I think many people are optimistic, and this is what I was saying about Egypt, that perhaps a new freedom, a new phase is coming. And as we sit here today, of course, Tunisia has made changes. Egypt has made changes. Now we're looking at Algeria, and I believe, is it Yemen? And then also, in addition, even Italy, I don't know if you saw that, but the women are out there against Berlusconi, you know. And as a woman, I have to stand up, I guess, with them. But, that's up to them, really, in Italy. There's been a history, of course, that kind of stuff. But I think all this is a movement forward. And that's the important thing.
This is the external enthusiasm. There has to be the internal sense of movement and solidarity that has to be based upon soul-to-soul contact and celebration, without which these things pass away very, very quickly, and you're back into another political game. So it's not a situation of changing political passports or baptismal meal tickets. It's the civilizations from the future meeting us in the present, where we are required to make a change of totality, which means right across the board, from medicine to mathematics through astrophysics. There has to be a new type of leadership, and that leadership has to be holistic, it has to be humanistic, it has to be compassionate on all levels. Otherwise, you're simply throwing out jargon or sweet-sounding words.
And of course, Egypt can go backwards as well, and I think we're all aware of that, and we're trying to look at it as being more positive and
Egypt
forward.
And its pyramids represent the foundation stone of so many of the great cultures. The library of the ancients is there coded in stone and in a soundscape of vibration that is so critical.
And also, I mean, the change is taking place right there. I mean, really almost more major than what took place in Tunisia in a certain sense, with the way the people really stood there for almost 2 weeks to get this change happening. Egypt is almost the central focal point of the land masses, if nothing else, on the earth. And so, we feel that this energy is penetrating outwards and upwards, and it's happening in all levels. We can say, of course, the economic is changing as we see this. I mean, there has to be new structures, new solutions. The political...
It must come with music, and they must come with the higher symbols as we see here of the Ankh. There has to be a sign of a higher connectiveness that comes through a higher language of song and celebration, as well as science and consciousness that goes into the roots of consciousness.
So many people are now talking about the day after 2012, or December 22nd, 2012, as going to be the day that we step forward in all of this. But we actually think that change is in the consciousness of the species. Mm-hmm. And even though we can be helped with new areas of understanding of genetics and of astrophysics and of atomic structures and all that stuff, but it really takes us. And when we're ready, that's what it takes. Now, the Egyptians were ready. Let's hope that energy can hold. When the economy, might have to shift, and it has shifted in some ways, let's hope, towards a positive future. But there's no date. We never give dates, really, per se, because it all is within the consciousness of the species. The consciousness is operating as a collective consciousness. Mm-hmm. We're not only observers. We actually put energy into the system, and we all should be putting positive energy into the system to make exactly what our friend John there had said.
Mm-hmm. So the ordinary human frequency is about 1.9 centimeters, about 3/4 of an inch, to about 17 meters or 56 feet. I mean, it's a very small frequency range. We have to enlarge this to the whole planet. The whole planet must become a musical note. Mm. And we should ask our counterparts what music they bring us. What harmonies of the soul do they share with us? Mm. How do they connect with the great epic cycles of our ancestors? And do they respect our free will and opportunity to also create and to co-evolve with them? The bottom line, co-evolution, co-participation has to be there. And not shining black glasses, and certainly not big spaceships that we see with Steven Spielberg. We are the vehicle. We are on Spaceship Earth. And we are the cosmonauts of the future.
Yeah. And our message is also co-participation with one another. And I think, unfortunately, many people have gotten very isolated, and in this country, even narcissistic, which means you're operating very in a singularity. But we have to realize that as we need to work closer with the brotherhoods and sisterhoods in space and in higher realms of intelligence, we also need to work closer with the brothers and sisters here on planet Earth. We all need to take up our role, as we were given even in the book of Genesis, as caretakers of Mother Earth. I do believe that we have the ability to introduce new energy technologies. We have the ability to clean up the environment. This is part of the work of the Academy for Future Science. But we really need to do this collectively and do it with a positive understanding of life.
And we realize finally that love is the foundation that holds it all together. This is the great message. Mm-hmm. Love of the living light and the living light of love that binds us with all life forms throughout this fantastic universe. The entry to the house of many mansions is before us. Mm-hmm. The opportunity is here. We must take advantage and go forward with a celebration of life.
Absolutely. And just to add, I think, people who have worked hard to inform and elevate others, such as yourselves, I would say are the leaders of this new age. And all of those who are really are doing it from an altruistic perspective, not assuming authority, but just doing what we do and helping others. That is leadership, and I think that is going on right now. And that is why I believe that this shift isn't going to be quite as tumultuous and chaotic as everyone is so fearful of, because there's so many of us who are focused on not manifesting that, and so. And thank you for calling, John. I'm sorry we have to move on. We just have about a minute left here worth of streaming, so I'm going to be closing up. So any last thoughts?
I was going to say I appreciate we appreciate the work that you're doing too, because getting the message out worldwide, which you're able to do on the internet, is a fantastic way of spreading a positive message for the planet.
And we appreciate your opportunity to share with brothers and sisters around Mother Earth. So we visualize in closing brothers and sisters holding hands around Mother Earth, involving the dance of life, with a big, happy smile upon their hearts of compassion reaching forth, and a great crown of light with the celebration of to the stars. Mm-hmm. May we go forth as peacemakers of the future, and may we all be blessed in the great chapter of the Book of Life as we ascend into the next chapter of the Tree of Life.
Thank you very much. And those are great words to end it on. And thank you for this amazing opportunity to actually have a personal sit-down with both of you. And thank everyone for joining us today. We had a great audience, some great questions, awesome insight I saw going on in there in the chat room too. Be sure to check back with us on Thursday. We'll be having another great show. And be sure to check out universaltruthevolution.com to see all of our archives, including the archive of this show, in the future, and whenever you need to call upon some interesting information. So thank you, everyone, once again. We will see you next time, and just keep on doing what you want to do there, people. Manifest reality we all want to witness and love. So rock on.
That was almost perfect time.
just a candle in my hand.